4 spots, but 1 loss, 1 play, 1 injury can determine the fate of a team, the legacy of a quarterback, the departure of a wide receiver, or the tenure of a head coach. This is the college football playoffs. Welcome everyone to Unfiltered, where we break down the top Ohio State sports, all the way down to our latest predictions in just 10 minutes. The clock starts now. First and foremost, welcome everyone to tuning into our second episode of Unfiltered. Today is December 3rd, and for the college football playoffs, that means Selection Sunday. And a lot happened, and by a lot, I mean a lot. So guys, if you had one word to describe what were your feelings, what were your reactions to seeing these CFP rankings, what would that word be and why?
Disbelief. I mean, I was in disbelief by Texas being ranked number 3 and Alabama being ranked number 4, and Georgia going from number 1 to number 6. I was really shocked by that.
I was shocked to just see FSU completely out of the top 4. I mean, they had an undefeated season. It's just really crazy to me.
And my word would definitely be controversy. This is kind of self-explanatory, but FSU, Georgia, Texas, and Alabama getting in. I mean, the whole thing is very controversial.
Controversy is a good word. Shock, historic, those are all good words. And emotions obviously ran very high, including for us here in the studio where we watch the rankings live. So tune in here to see our reactions.
As we said right off the top,
it's going to be Bama.
Really? I think it's Georgia. Florida State.
It's Georgia? I forgot about Georgia.
Texas now has made it into the field. Let's have a look at these remaining resumes.
They're doing number 4 now.
And Alabama returns to the playoff, and so we have another unprecedented situation as Florida State.
Elise, you mentioned controversy being your word, and there was a lot, especially with FSU not being in. And their head coach, Mike Norvell, was not happy. If you didn't see it, he was not happy. Okay, not at all. His team went 13-0. They were undefeated. They became the first Power 5 team to not secure a top 4 ranking. So, Elise, what was your reaction when you heard of that?
Yeah, so I think the committee really had their hands full this time around. I mean, any way you slice it, a team or two that deserved to be in it was going to be left out. And much to Ohio State fans' dismay, nothing that they needed to happen to get in happened, and much to the committee's dismay, this meant absolute chaos and honestly their worst nightmare. And you know, my heart breaks for Florida State, but I think that the 4 teams that got in will lead to really good playoff games, and I'm all for that, even though Ohio State didn't get in.
Yeah, well, I agree with what you said about how, you know, they're going to be pretty great games. I do not agree with what the committee did at all. I mean, they make such a big emphasis on it's all about your record, what you do throughout the entire season. Florida State remained undefeated the entire time. They won the ACC championship with their 3rd string quarterback, and they still didn't make it in. So it really does get you thinking where the committee's heads were at when they were choosing, because, like, I mean, Ohio State obviously didn't make it in, but Ohio State has the most top 5 ranked teams out of all of the current top 4 teams. And it seems that apparently a loss to the now number 1 team in the country is worse than losing to Oklahoma, who was ranked number 12 at the time. And sure, people can use the argument that the Buckeyes didn't go to a conference championship, but Florida State did, and they won, and they remained undefeated, and they still got kicked out of top 4 contention. So I guess the question of does it mean anything remains.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this year more than any has brought up the question, does the regular season even matter anymore? You know, Ohio State, like you said, had a great strength of schedule, but as soon as they lost to Michigan, they were out of playoff contention. And if you listen to any of the college football playoff talk this past week, Ohio State wasn't even mentioned. And they lost to the now number 1 ranked team by only 6 points. So it really does make you question the committee's criteria. But one thing is for sure, if you're Ohio State, you need to win the Michigan game. That is their deciding game for the playoffs. It was never going to be the Big Ten championship game. It was always going to be the Michigan game. If you're Ohio State and you want to get into the playoffs, you have to beat Michigan, and they didn't do that this year.
And you mentioned they needed to beat Michigan, but they didn't. And also, they needed a lot to happen this past weekend, but it didn't. Wins for Alabama, FSU, Texas essentially knocked Ohio State out of the playoffs and into the Cotton Bowl to face Missouri. And Daniella will take us more into what that looks like.
Yeah, the Buckeyes, who are now ranked number 7, will be facing off against the Missouri Tigers, who are ranked number 9 in the Cotton Bowl. Obviously, with the Buckeyes not playing for a national championship title, the question looms, will the starters even be playing during this bowl game? I mean, we'll have to see during that game. And as we've discussed, the picks are in for who will be competing for that national championship trophy in Houston, Texas. Alabama, who is ranked number 4, will be facing off against the number 1 team, the Michigan Wolverines, who is, like I said, number 1. They're going to be playing in the Sugar Bowl. And Texas, who is ranked number 3, will be taking on the number 2 ranked Washington Huskies in the Rose Bowl. What game are y'all most excited to watch?
For me, definitely the Michigan-Alabama game. I think this will be a really good test for not only, well, for Michigan, but also a good chance for Alabama to kind of prove themselves, prove that the dynasty is not over, and I'll be rooting for Alabama.
Okay, you mentioned the dynasty being over. Obviously, Alabama didn't have a great start to the season, but I think it's always, I love rooting for like the underdogs, and I feel like at first they were, but now they're back to their old selves. So I feel like the next underdog will be Washington because they came out the blue. But eventually, as far as the games go, I would love to see Alabama versus Michigan, Jim Harbaugh versus old Nick Saban. So that would be extremely interesting to see. And speaking of these bowl games, they have some of the top players. A lot of these players are Heisman candidates, and Ryan will take us into what those rankings look like now that the CFP rankings are out.
Yes, so the Heisman battle has definitely shifted within the last 24 hours because of all of these championship games. And I think it's important to understand what does the Heisman Trophy means, which is the most outstanding player in football. So it doesn't mean biases, it doesn't mean popularity of these teams, it means who played well the entire season. So ranked at number 1, we have Bo Nix, and although they fell short to Washington, Nix has completed 77% of his passes for 4,145 yards and 40 touchdowns, which is very impressive even though they are ranked number 8 now. Next, we have Jaden Daniels ranked at number 2, and even though LSU didn't get the opportunity to play for the SEC championship, they went 9-3 for the season, 6-2 in the SEC conference, which is really great, and he's had over 500 yards consecutively throughout the entire season, for 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns, which is really amazing. And then finally, Michael Penix Jr. is ranked at 3. He is undefeated, as we have just talked about. Washington has stayed undefeated this season. They're ranked number 2 now in the college football playoff. And, you know, he's this talented lefty. He's had 300-plus yards in 9 of 13 of his games, which is really amazing. So I guess with all of these stats, do you guys agree with these rankings for the Heisman? Do you think that one of these players is your Heisman candidate for the year? Or is there anyone else?
I mean, don't get me wrong. I think these 3 quarterbacks are extremely talented and extremely good football players, but I don't necessarily think that they're the best in college football. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think, as you mentioned, they're great quarterbacks, but when you mention who is the best football player in college football, it is Marvin Harrison Jr. And in my opinion, it isn't even close, okay? It isn't even close. It's Marvin Harrison Jr. When you turn on your TV, and I know you do, at 8 a.m., 10 a.m., or at noon to tune into First Take, Undisputed, whatever sports show you watch, the best player, whoever is talked about, is Marvin Harrison Jr. He is most likely going number 1 overall, which hasn't happened in close to over a decade. The last receiver to be picked was Keyshawn. So, obviously, I think it will be Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yeah, I mean, I think it should be Marvin. Obviously, like you said, you turn on TV, everybody's talking about Marvin Harrison Jr. is the best college football player. Even on social media, it's not just on TV. You open your phone, Instagram, Twitter, whatever it may be, it's Marvin Harrison. But from these 3 contenders, I don't really have a preference. I guess if I had to choose 2, it would be between Jaden Daniels and Michael Penix Jr. Obviously, Michael Penix Jr., he's led Washington to an amazing season. They're now going to be competing for that national championship trophy. And he's done great things. And, you know, although Jaden Daniels is not competing for a national championship trophy, he's also done really impressive this season. So, I mean, my picks would be between those 2.
Unlike Marvin Harrison Jr., Michael Penix Jr. will be competing for a national championship. So I'm wondering, who do you guys have winning the Natty?
You know, this is going to be a little bit controversial, but I just have to go with Bama. Give me Bama. And the reason is the road to a Bama win is a Michigan loss, and I am all for that every day.
I would love for Washington to win. I mean, Bama, I feel like we see the same teams every year. It's Georgia, Bama, Georgia, Bama. Oh, I'm tired of it. I want to see a new team. I think Washington will give you that new flair. So I would love for Washington to win.
This may be a bit controversial, and I may be crucified as an Ohio State fan, but I have to say I'm going for Michigan. They're the team that I want first. No.
Yeah, we were about to stop the show.
I'm between Alabama and Washington. I think Alabama has proved themselves in the beginning of the season after their loss to Texas. Everyone was like, the Nick Saban dynasty is over. Alabama's done. Clearly not, because they made it. So, I mean, I think it would be a great story for them. They've came back. But Washington has that Cinderella story. They're undefeated. And I just think, like I said, it's a Cinderella story, and it'd be really fun to watch them win.
And for me, I'm going for Washington. That purple baby. We gotta get it. We gotta get it. Michael Penix deserves this after this undefeated season. And you know, no one really talks about Washington. So if they won just out of nowhere, I think it would be really fun, really amazing.
Yeah.
And just like Jayla said, just kind of like a different flair on the game. So
Definitely.
anyways, to see who wins and to see our reactions for the national championship, tune into the next episode.